CRN TV is connecting you with the industry leaders who are protecting us from the latest security threats. Join me, Cass Cooper, as we highlight the expertise of women who are driving innovation and solving today's toughest cyber challenges. Welcome to Channel Women in Security. Welcome to Channel Women in Security, where we highlight the leaders shaping the future of cybersecurity in the IT channel. I am your host, Cass Cooper, and today I am joined by the Field CTO for Cloud Security and Emerging Technologies at Commvault. Vidya, it's so great to have you. I'll give you a moment to introduce yourself to our audience and talk about your nearly 2 decades of global experience. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure, happy to. And thank you for having me. I'm Vidya Shankaran, Field CTO at Commvault. I've been with Commvault coming up on my 10th year anniversary very soon. So with that, I would say that that also marks my 2-decade-long experience tenure within the IT landscape. So I started out as an AS400 developer. I'm sure I'm dating myself now. But eventually I moved into pre-sales and forayed into some of those key strategic digital transformation, cloud security, and AI landscape very quickly. So I would say I've been very much in step with the way the industry has developed and evolved over time.
So let's talk a little bit about that cloud modernization that's shaping the way enterprises approach cybersecurity. How do you see that connecting to risk management today?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. So I would probably want to take you back 5 or 6 years ago. And
Yeah.
at that time when organizations were just about getting started with cloud as such, I wouldn't make a bold statement there saying that they were just about testing waters. There were some really mature organizations that had a strong footprint in the cloud by then. Some of the vast majority were already testing, trying to figure out if they could move their test dev environments to the cloud. But that was still, I would say, they were just getting started. But over time, we saw this massive acceleration, whether it was COVID that kind of accelerated it, or they were already in the process of maturing to those stages in their cloud journey. But what was also key and important was the risk appetite for those organizations. We saw this massive evolution in what was their risk appetite and how much they could stomach in terms of downtime or data loss. So those were some of the key considerations that organizations were making now as they were looking towards modernizing their on-prem infrastructure to the cloud, or maybe even starting out with born in the cloud applications.
Yeah. Okay. So how does that connect to what you do today at Commvault? I mean, let's bridge that gap from where we were a few years ago to where we are now, and then we'll talk. We can't have these conversations without talking about machine learning and AI and all of that. But I like the idea of taking us back, bringing us through, and then connecting that to where we're potentially going. So tell us, how does Commvault sit at the center of all of that?
Yeah, in fact, the moment I talk about risk appetite, that's exactly what comes to people's minds. How can you start de-risking, especially organizations that are in the process of modernization or already into one of the two or in a hybrid landscape today, right? That risk appetite that I talked about is not just from an uptime perspective, but from the cyber context of things. I would say all landscapes are at equal footing when it comes to vulnerability or being exposed to a cyber attack, right? And that in itself is what lends to Commvault's relevance in this space. Because whether we like it or not, I think organizations have kind of mentally reconciled to the fact that an attack is here and now. Every organization is just as exposed and susceptible to it. But the true strength of a business's maturity or in its ability to bounce back is measured more in terms of how much can I accept a risk, architect for overall recoverability, and actually showcase that level of recoverability when it's time to respond. So all of these points naturally have a natural connection when we talk about overall cyber resilience with Commvault. And that is where I would say a lot of our customers, our prospects are actually in the process of deliberating too.
Our readership and listenership, we are connected to the partners and really making sure that they have the right information in front of them as they make decisions, not just for their own organizations, but for their clients and their customers. What are some of the things that you would like our audience specifically? What are some of the things that you would like partners to recognize in connecting, that risk management strategy in their stomach for risk that it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when it
Mhm.
comes to cyber. What would you like them to know? What do you think that maybe like the top 2 or 3 things that they need to know in today's cybersecurity landscape?
Absolutely. I think I'm glad that you brought that question up because definitely it is not an exercise or an endeavor that a customer does independently in-house. So definitely an ecosystem of partners that can support them in that exercise is a must-have. And the reason why I bring up the partners' pivotal play in this is there is pretty much like what you have with hyperscalers today, the shared responsibility model, right? This is where between the partners and the customers, having that shared responsibility model in what is the risk exposure, how much can be offset, what are the parameters or the driving criteria that each of the participants between partners and customers, who's responsible for what? Like, let's say the partners are responsible for creating those frameworks of risk mitigation, maybe even threat modeling, governance templates. And then you have the customers that come in that provide and maintain, which is the key element of the shared responsibility matrix, is the accountability, the provenance, the data quality in itself, and the regulatory requirements. So I think it is an ecosystem that comes into play to make the customer successful in their exercise.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about AI. We focus so much on cybersecurity, but we are just in this revolution right now, and we can't not talk about AI, even though, in the connections there. How are you seeing, AI generating new risks? I just think there's so much that goes on with understanding AI in and of itself.
AI does bring with it an inherent set of risks. And I think a lot of organizations are extremely, I would say, judicious, especially as they are evaluating various products, whether with embedded AI capabilities or as an AI platform in itself. Definitely, there's a lot of due diligence that is going on to make sure that they are adopting a responsible AI stance. What are the key underpinnings of that AI platform? Is it ethical? Is it bias free? How safe is it? Are in terms of prompt injection protection perspective? How do you ensure that there is minimal drift or hallucination coming off of that AI platform? And enforcing those guardrails is just as important for the customer to.
So let's pivot and talk a little bit about your role as a field CTO. What for those, it's a term that our listeners are probably very familiar with, but tell me more about what your specific brand, if you will, of being a field CTO looks like. Like, what kind of leader are you?
That's a fantastic question. It's almost introspective, but I would say I'm the kind of person that loves learning. And a lot of my own core principles are based off of learning. So that also means that I'm constantly listening to things. So I would prioritize listening over talking too much, if that makes sense. But in a lot of this aspect, what I've also noticed is continuous learning is a core tenet for any kind of role, right? Leadership does come with additional responsibilities because there's a lot more value to what is being endorsed or what is being talked about. But in my view, definitely learning and unlearning, which is equal in parts, I would say, because of the rapid evolution of the space that we are in, is a core requirement for my role and something that I've always lived by. But in terms of leadership principles as well, I think something that technology or even AI cannot teach you to do is be empathetic, right?
Mm.
And empathy is not something um, that can be, I would say, is not technology driven solution to solve for. It is the most human side that we can bring to the table. And a lot of the way I conduct myself is with a lot of empathy, with a lot of understanding. And that is also very foundational to how I go about my day to day business. Because again, tying it back into cyber context of things, whether we like it or not, the kind of impact that it has on psyche, the people who are in the throes of an attack, people actually come off of it with legitimate PTSD symptoms.
Yeah.
So treating that with empathy is very important, and also something that we've been seeing actively across the customer base that I've been talking to is HR teams are investing in, emotional counseling for employees who've been through war room like situations. So definitely empathy is a core part of it. And I would blend it in with learning about, various facets of how technology is also aiding it.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that about empathy as far as leading people. I don't really hear a lot about what that looks like after. Or wonder, can you like peel that onion a little bit for me?
Sure. So, what typically happens is, especially to your point, we start out with how we need to be prepared. We need to have all our, uh, proverbial ducks in a row ahead of an attack. But when the organization is smack in the middle of an attack itself, what also pans out is you have now teams crammed into a war room for 3 weeks or even 4 weeks on the trot.
Mhm.
That does have a massive impact. And also, what happens is up until the attack, everything is great, everything is rosy. But during an attack, a lot of finger pointing also happens. This is where as a leader, the focus is on outcomes. How do we collectively come out of the crisis without necessarily pointing fingers at each other? Because it's not one singular person or a team that is responsible for an attack. It is a collective vulnerability that was probably exploited by a malicious actor. Now, coming out of the crisis itself, it definitely has a lasting impact on several individuals, and some of them actually shy away from going back into their regular day jobs. So this is where understanding that this is not their fault. It is an organizational vulnerability that was probably exploited. And that understanding can definitely make a world of difference, because those resources that were in the war room, we have a lot to learn from them and how to probably go back to our drawing board and revise our strategy in itself. So by not tapping into that tribal knowledge of resources who were in the heart of the attack, we are actually losing out on a lot of information, very valid, usable data and information.
Speaking of people, I always like to ask about what you would tell your younger self, right? So, what are some of the things that you may have told your younger self or you wish you would have known after a few decades? I wish I would have, told myself this, or if I could tell myself this one thing. Because I think that's some of what, as younger generations come into this space, I'm really interested to know what can we impart to them.
I would say that, again, I probably sound like a broken record, but learning never stops. It never stops, especially to all the kids in, middle school or high school that are probably looking forward to getting a job. It probably doesn't come off of a textbook anymore, but you're constantly learning. You're learning from people around you. You're learning from headlines. You're learning from different cultures, but that doesn't stop, and that should not stop, because that means we stop evolving. So the thing that I would tell my younger self is the same thing. Flash news, learning never really did stop.
Yeah, yeah. So, speaking of books, and this will be our final question, what are you reading right now?
So this is kind of interesting because I am revisiting or rereading the book on Richard Feynman. Surely
Hmm.
you're joking, Mr. Feynman. And this is probably my third time I'm reading this book. And I love Richard Feynman, and I totally adhere to his philosophy of breaking down complex concepts just so that I'm able to ingest and able to connect the dots for our customers and partners. Because to be able to digest in bite-sized chunks is so vital, because you suddenly realize that it's not as daunting as it was made out to be. So that is something that has always been a core learning tactic for me. Again, coming off of Richard Feynman, and that's the book I'm revisiting. It actually came up on one of my discussions last week. I was like, oh shoot, I need to probably pick this up again.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time and reminding us that cybersecurity isn't just about protection. It's about enabling innovation and trust and really making sure that we're staying connected to the human parts of the business as well. So I'm really glad that we got to spend this time together, and hopefully we'll be able to meet in person one day real soon.
Thanks for having me.